I recently spent 3 weeks in Australia doing, at long last, my permaculture design course. This is not about permaculture, but that does influence my outlook on things, and I'm going to reference it a little bit, but I could do a separate presentation on that, and I've got some pretty cool slides for that too. But anyway, I want to talk about Utah. I noticed the Deseret News had an interesting headline yesterday, no drought now. So we've all noticed and I hope enjoyed the rainfall that we've gotten. And you might think, well, why do we have to worry about water? Before we get to that, I'm going to talk about several topics, water and soil and plants, and so mostly from the household level. Thank you. I'm not here telling my public servants how to run things. Now, I don't want this quote to scare anybody off, but I didn't come with lists of like things to do, like ditch your plastic shopping bags, and so that's a good thing to do. And use reusable water containers, that's a good thing to do. But I want to talk more about sort of a conceptual level, but also pair that with some specific things relating to life in Utah. And just things to kind of park in the back of your brain as we're going. What is sustainability? One definition I found is the ability to continue indefinitely without outside support. Bill Mollison, the co-founder of permaculture, called it, he said, a sustainable system creates more energy than it uses, which is really interesting to think about when you think about like lawns, for instance, or landscaping and all the water and inputs that go into maintaining those. The last 2 quotes come from an online course I'm still in the middle of. Sustainable living is meeting the needs of the present generation without diminishing the ability of future generations to meet their needs. And it's a process, not an end goal. So some concepts that I relate to, one is that we are a part of nature, not a part of nature. Nature is all about relationships in and between intelligent systems. And nothing in nature grows forever. Everything is cyclical. Nature is more about cooperation and competition, in my view, and this isn't, I didn't come up with this, but I agree with it. Microbes rule the world, and most of them are benign or beneficial, and we often grow up being kind of germophobic in the last 50 years since penicillin was discovered and all that. And there are wonderful things that come from antibiotics, but there's more and more research into like the human gut biome, and the same thing is going on in the soil. Digestion and the immune system in human beings are very tied to healthy gut bacteria, and we're finding more and more that this is true in the soil. So it's a living ecosystem. Now, I'll touch back on most of these concepts at some point. And trees affect rainfall and climate, stabilize soil, and support all life. So I have lots of key concepts. Fungi and mycelium connect trees and build soil, and they've been called the internet of the soil. Now, when we talk about mushrooms, we think of them as just a distinct thing. They're just the fruiting body of fungi, and the mycelium is the filaments that are connected underground. And what we see normally is just the mushroom, the fruiting body. But so there's a lot going on there that we've only learned about in recent decades, and I'll get back to that. Biodiversity, as Jeff said, adds synergy and resilience to our ecosystems. So I'm going to get to, sorry, this is a lot of concepts, and I don't want to be too hung up on that, but this is kind of where I'm coming from, is what I want to say. So I think if we make better use of our water resources, we can have more abundance and resilience, whether we're talking about excess of water, flooding that we've had this year, or a deficit or drought, which we often have. And when I was in Australia on the 66-acre permaculture farm that was really just a beautiful, beautiful place. It's a subtropical climate, so a lot of things grow there easily that wouldn't grow well in Utah. But as we were learning different concepts and walking around and seeing them be applied on the farm, I just kept thinking, nature hasn't figured out, which is kind of obvious. Instead of what would Jesus do, I like to think, what would nature do? And this is a great quote. The task we face today is to understand the language of nature. Now, this is an experiment to see if, we did try it earlier, but if I can show a short clip from a film featuring Paul Stamets. He's the author of this fantastic, life-changing book called Mycelium Running: How Mushrooms Can Help Save the World. And I do not think that is all an exaggeration, so this will take just a second to... And I think this sound is good. This is only like 3 minutes, two minutes.
Mushroom mycelium represents rebirth, rejuvenation, regeneration. Fungi generate soil that gives life. The task that we face today is to understand the language of nature. My mission is to discover the language of nature of the fungal networks that communicate with the ecosystem. And I, in particular, believe nature is intelligent. The fact that we lack the language skills to communicate with nature does not impugn the concept that nature is intelligent. It speaks to our inadequacy of our skill set for communication. We have now learned that there are these languages that are occurring and communication between each organism. If we don't get our act together and come in commonality and understanding with the organisms that sustain us today, not only will we destroy those organisms, but we will destroy ourselves. We need to have a paradigm shift in our consciousness. What will it take to achieve that? If I die trying, but I'm inadequate to the task to make a course change in the evolution of life on this planet, okay, I tried. The fact is I tried. How many people are not trying? If you knew that every breath you took could save hundreds of lives into the future, have you walk down this path of knowledge, wouldn't you run down that path of knowledge as fast as you could? I believe nature is a force of good. Good is not only a concept, it is a spirit. And so hopefully the spirit of goodness will survive.
Okay, this is going to be a little bit data heavy, but we'll go through it quickly. So this map is from January of this year, and the numbers are the percentage of normal of snowpack or total precipitation. And so we know we had more since then, and you'd have to be really not paying attention to not realize that we had a lot of rain this year and a lot of snow. And that's a good thing. So it might be tempting to think, problem solved, droughts over. I want to look at a few things about Utah. Utah is the driest state in the US after Nevada, and we're very close on the tail of Nevada. And it's considered a semi-arid climate. We have a limited supply of water. The average statewide is just 13 inches of rainfall a year, 22 inches for the Utah Lake Basin, so we get a little more than others. National average is 30 inches. We have an unpredictable supply, as we've seen this year compared to like the last several years. There's a wide annual variation in rainfall. So extremes of both drought and floods are normal for Utah, so why not be prepared for it? And we have a fast-growing population. There was a newspaper headline this week saying Lehigh was the 11th fastest growing city in the country. And this last number, the population is expected to double to more than 5 million by 2050. That's from like 2002 or so, roughly. So how do we respond to growing demand for water? Because next year may not be as abundant a water year as this year. And so, one thing from a public policy standpoint, one thing to do is to price water so that it encourages efficiency and discourages waste. But I'm not going to dwell on public policy too much. And conventional wisdom says, well, we just need to build more dams, have hydropower, or we need to conserve, reduce our usage, boost efficiency. And I'm not disparaging any of those things, but there's another perspective. Permaculture really limited things like collect rainwater and sculpture your landscape to slow the movement of water through the landscape, and so it can be absorbed to add resilience and abundance regardless of the climate. So I don't want to dwell on this too much, but just basically this is saying that if it weren't for the mountains, we would just be flat out an arid state. But the mountains and the trees cool the air and capture water from passing storm systems. And I was really struck by this. About 87% of our annual precipitation evaporates before it even reaches the stream or aquifer. So we do get a lot of water, but it's because it's hot and dry, climate-wise, most of it disappears before we get to use it for anything. So, again, sorry for the data-heavy segment. Don't fall asleep. So 85% of our water is used by agriculture, and that's only going to decline as more and more farms are turned into housing developments. And our per capita water usage is also second only to Nevada, and it's quite high. So I found that very interesting that despite us being one of the driest states, we use more water, and maybe it's because we have to for irrigation. 321 gallons per capita per day is what that abbreviation is. And yet our water rates, the amount of money people are paying for water usage, are well below the national average in Utah, among the lowest in the Rocky Mountain states, which tend to be drier. And so the experts figure there's a further 790,000 acre feet per year of water that can be developed with dams or whatever that are economically feasible. And so the state has a goal of reducing per capita water usage 25% before 2050. And again, I don't remember the base year, but it was early 2000s. And this comes from a report from the Utah government. This photo is the side of a gigantic, probably like 5,000 gallon water collection tank at Jeanmarie Farm where I did my PhD in Australia. And if you only do one thing, collect rainwater. And while I was there, even though it's a very lush climate there, but all of the drinking water, culinary water, and shower water was collected rainwater. So just putting that out there, some possibilities, something to think about. I'm not telling you everybody's got to go out and do this, but it's just, I want to put the idea in your brain that this is feasible and that people actually do this sort of thing. So, but if we do collect rainwater, and aside from that, even if we don't collect it, but just protect the soils, we can be less vulnerable to either drought or floods. Now, I'm not talking about the public policy level, but on the household level, the community level. So one thing that, I live in my parents' condo with them, and condos, universally seem to have very restrictive HOAs, and they're lawn-based. So just in a little narrow strip of planting beds surrounding the condo, I mulched everything and added a lot of perennials. And this is just something my friends will attest that I'm preaching to them all the time, that if you protect the soil with mulch, trees, native plants, and add organic matter in the form of compost or other soil amendments, your soil, the character of the soil changes, and it can hold more water and also carbon, which is a good thing to do. And this is how this little spot next to the driveway is how it looked a year ago when I planted it, and even though the photo is smaller, but just everything really burgeoned. And that's only watering it once a week, but I think I forgot to water it a number of times last summer, but it's still really, and these all died off during the winter, but they're winter hardy perennials, so they just grew back again and bigger and better. So this is an idea that is talked about a lot in permaculture, and again, this may apply, you might think it applies more to a farm. This illustration is really kind of from a more of a farm scenario. But you'll hear the term swale a lot, and it's like a ditch, except that it's usually shallower and might be wider, but it's on contour so that it's not draining water away. The intent isn't to drain the water, it's to slow it down so that as rain rolls down hills, and otherwise it's going to erode the soil and wash the soil away. If it's slowed down with these depressions in the earth on contour, it will collect the water and allow it to absorb into the soil, and then more gently continue down the landscape. Yes?
Can
I say something about that real quick?
Yes. I haven't identified the tree yet.
No, it was before that. It was just it's amazing to see that in action. We used to, we have, our land goes like this, and then there's a football field with a track,
Yeah.
and that track, anytime it rained, would be filled with water.
Yeah.
After I got done with that yard, you never saw water on that
Because you're
track.
just wisely collecting it.
Yeah, it was being collected in the basins and.
And, okay, I gotta zip through, just, you know, that trees have deep roots, or should, so that to encourage deep root growth, you want to water them deeply for a long time, but infrequently. Once they're established, I mean, the maximum you'd ever water them would be like once a week, or more likely once a month. And some are not watered at all because they get enough during the winter. So here are some practical tips. This is a picture I took in my neighborhood a couple of weeks ago. It's about 9 a.m. and I'm not sure if it shows up that well here, but basically the water is just, you can just see it evaporating. And you can also see that a lot of it's just running away out into the sidewalk and the drain. So, so there are simple things to do to minimize that. Another idea is to replace your park strip lawn with native or drought-tolerant plants. This photo is actually from the Central Utah Gardens, which is a great place to go, a lot of ideas. And I would like to encourage the idea of reducing lawn size and adding water-wise native drought-tolerant plants. And if you live in an HOA like I do, you can't do anything about the lawn size. But I added these plants without permission and nobody complained because it looks good. And the mulch too. You can adjust your lawnmower to a higher setting so that the grass helps shade roots and retains more water. And don't use water, just clean everything if you can sweep it. And my mantra is no bare soil, mulch everything. But be careful not to keep up mulch around your tree trunks because you could get fungal, you want to leave an inch margin or so around the tree. And I'm just going to skip through these things because these are kind of no-brainer ideas, I think. And this is the now walk from my house. I think water is a precious resource to be enjoyed. So it's not about, not living, not enjoying things, and being really strict and all that, but more wise water use can create a lot of abundance that we can enjoy. So some resources I recommend: Central Utah Gardens. If you haven't been there, please go and see it. It's in Orem. And Conservation Garden Park, so it's a sister organization, Jordan River Water District, and localscapes.org, which I will quickly introduce you to. Localscapes is a concept designed by the not Central Utah Gardens, the other one. And it's landscaping patterns and practices that are designed for Utah's climate. Now, most people's idea about landscaping is default inherited from England, where there's a lot of rain, lawns grow automatically, and They don't have sprinklers and irrigation systems not needed, as far as I know. And but if we design for this landscape, we can have lower maintenance, spend more time enjoying your yard, simplify your irrigation, more water efficient, et cetera. And there are classes that you can take. I've taken the basic one, I signed up for the next 2 levels. And basically they talk about designing your yard around a central open shape. And they're not preaching don't have lawns. They're saying just plant it and then make it functional, put it where you're going to use it, and then design other areas like vegetable gardens, play areas, then paths connecting them, the different activity zones, and then plant lots of trees and drought-tolerant landscape plants and mulch everything. So don't have narrow strips of lawn in your side yard, which are just a pain to mow and you can't water them efficiently and that sort of thing. So go to lowscapes.com or visit Central Utah Gardens in Orem, or see their website for ideas and instruction. And there's a lot I can talk about lawns, and I don't want to run out of time to cover the other things, but Americans spend a lot of water and money on chemicals and on lawn services and time taking care of lawns, which doesn't necessarily suit our climate in Utah. And they tend to be full of pesticides, and those pesticides do have negative effects. And I'll post this on the site if you want to see, this detail and where I got these things from. So if you must have a lawn, consider a drought-tolerant variety instead of Kentucky bluegrass, fescues, and ones like that. And the usual recommendation is to delay irrigation until after Mother's Day so that the grass develops stronger roots. Shrink your lawn, but keep it at least 8 feet in diameter. The narrow strips can't be watered efficiently. And that's when you get water, people watering their cement, sidewalks, and driveways. That's why the localscapes concept of a central open area is at least 8 feet in diameter makes sense from a water-wise viewpoint. So plant using central shape, widen your planting beds. A lot of people are doing this now. They have plants around the rim and lawn in the middle, but they still have crooked, narrow areas and a lot of places that are going to be really hard to mow and to take care of. Again, so if you just shrink the lawn but have a central oval or kidney bean or circular shape that's easy to irrigate and easy to mow, then you've saved yourself a lot of time. You've got space for planting beautiful native plants, perennials, and there are things like drip irrigation. I have no expertise, no experience with that, but soak hoses are an easy way to go instead. And no bare soil, mulch everything. So as a comparison, I love this diagram of the root systems of prairie plants. So people think of grasslands and prairie as just empty space, but there's a lot going on there. And some of the roots can be longer than the plant is tall. In comparison, over here we have Kentucky bluegrass. So a little bit above ground, a little bit below ground. So that's why you have to keep watering the lawn a lot to keep it green. And prairies and these kind of native grass systems are really important for carbon storage. They clean the water. There's an important connection with the aquifers and having water available long term. Water quality always follows soil carbon levels, and prairies are the best soil carbon factories in the world, more than forests. Lawns do not compare and never will. So again, I'm not saying nobody can have lawns, and it's not up to me to decide, but just want you to think about options. And I'm just going to skip over some of these things. I want to talk about soil. A lot of what is known about soil and what is called the soil food web, all of the different life forms, including bacteria and fungi, that exist in the soil and that make it a healthy ecosystem. This has only been known since the 1980s, and this woman, Elaine Ingham, was one of the pioneers in studying this when she was a grad student at Colorado State University. And So there are different classes of organisms that all play a role, and it's, again, a harmonious system where everyone contributes. And then I'm going to skip over talking about beneficial bacteria, but they also play a role. Just the main point I want everyone to get from this is that there's a lot going on unseen to us. It's not unknown now. Fortunately, we live in an era when these things are being studied. But unfortunately, our farming practices and landscaping practices developed before there was this understanding of the soil food web and the beneficial bacteria that exist in the soil and the relationship that they have with plants and their plant roots. It's a mutually beneficial trading relationship. I'm going to skip over that. So the takeaway, and yes, I am obsessed with soil, mulch, and compost. Soil is a living ecosystem, not just a bunch of ground up minerals. Healthy soil includes organic matter, water, oxygen, and biology. In other words, the little critters and microbes that I refer to. And protecting the soil with mulch has many benefits, such as keeping the soil cooler in the summer and warmer in the winter. It helps your perennials overwinter. And it holds moisture in the soil, and it helps to prevent carbon and nitrogen, especially carbon, from just going back up into the atmosphere. Any soil is improved. So whether your soil is too alkaline and too acidic, or to this or to that, too much sand, too much clay, a healthy soil is a balance of sand and clay and silts, but any soil can benefit by the addition of organic matter, compost, mulch, plant roots. And when plants are like grass or the prairie grasses are grazed or lawn is mown on the top, there's a comparable die-off on the roots underground. And that die-off of the root matter becomes, it's basically composting in the soil, and that's how organic matter builds, and that's how soil is built. And if nature does it by itself without our assistance, it takes, I don't know, 500 years to develop an inch of soil, something like that. So we're depleting, in most places, depleting soil far faster than nature is creating it, but we can work with nature and speed up the process. And I would say weeds are better than bare soil. And just a quick look at trees. And, I could speak for an hour about all these subjects separately. But trees do a lot. This is a picture from the farm. They call this, there's a road, little path behind the trees he calls Bamboo Boulevard. And in front of that is, this is the water that you see there. This is a swale, and this is just a few days, I was there just a few days after their peak water event, where in one 24-hour period, they got 440 centimeters of water, which is over 17 inches. So if you can imagine, it was, and it was catastrophic for all the farms around them. You can see the topsoil sliding off the mountain. There were big gashes of red that you can see in the hills around this farm, but not on this farm because of the system of swales and dams and coverage with trees and mulching and composting, all things that they were doing. They were not devastated by the floods like farms around them. There's an interesting nonprofit in LA called treepeople.org, and they talk a lot about what trees do for us. And just a quick definition of permaculture: it's a contraction of the words permanent agriculture. In other words, sustainable as human settlements. And so the permaculture solutions to some of these things that we talked about, some of the challenges of water use would be directing gray water, in other words, water from your sink, dishwasher, things like that, to outdoors for landscape use. And you can create reed beds and simple water features that can actually clean the wastewater and make it potable water again. Harvest the rain in your roof, slow and infiltrate water with swales. And reducing it, one thing I just want to, I know Jeff wants me to finish up, but I'm going to.
Got a Q&A list to it too. So.
Yeah. One thing that I see a lot in the city is I walk my dog around in big cities especially, but even in a kind of a low-rise city like Orem, is there's so much hardscape. Some people's yards are just all cement, and it just kind of shocks me. Well, where does the water go? Where it's going to go that would normally hit the ground and sink in? At least some of it sink in. Well, it goes into the drains and storm drains, and it goes down to Utah Lake. And it's fine, Utah Lake is still below its historical levels, but it's starving the aquifers and the tree roots of trees and surrounding that of access to water. So permeable surfaces help the water get to where it needs to go. And can I just show this?
How long is it?
4 minutes.
Just Q&A.
So we went and had a look and we thought, oh no, this is the end of the earth. This is like as hard as you can get. This is hyper arid and it's 10 acres, almost dead flat.
This is in Jordan near the Dead Sea.
Below sea level, the lowest place on earth, 2 kilometres from the Dead Sea, right, to about 2 kilometres where Jesus was christened. Hardly got any rainfall. We've got temperatures in August that go over 50 degrees. Everybody's climbing under plastic strips. Everybody's spray. Everybody's putting synthetic fertiliser on. Overgrowth would go, just like maggots eating the flesh off the bone, down to the bones of the country. Literally like maggots, giant maggots eating it to nothing. So we designed up a system that would harvest every single bit of rainwater that fell on 10 acres. There's 1.5 kilometres of swale, water harvesting ditch on contour, and when they're full, 1 million litres of water soak into the landscape. And they'll fill quite a few times over a winter. And then we heavily mulch those swales with organic matter, which was trash from organic fields nearby. We put that almost 1/2 metre deep. So we saved that and mulched our swales, which are about 2 metres wide and 1/2 metre deep on the trench. Then we put micro irrigation underneath the mulch. And then on the uphill side of the water harvesting trench, we put nitrogen fixing very hardy pioneer desert trees, which help shade and reduce wind evaporation, and also put nitrogen into the soil and structure the soil for us. And then on the lower side of the trench, we put fruit trees, majoring in date palms as the long-term overstory in the end. And then we put in figs, pomegranates, guavas, mulberries, now some citrus. Within 4 months we had figs a metre high with figs on, which is impossible. We've done a course, male and female course, trained up some locals, and we've got a translator who's working for the project. He had his degree in agriculture in a Jordan University. And he got onto his mates and said, in the agricultural department, well, he said, we couldn't grow figs, we got figs growing and we got figs on them. You better come test the soil, because no matter what you say, we're either growing in salty soil what we shouldn't be growing, or we've desalted the soil, and we'd like to know what we've done. They came in and the salt levels were dropping. So they became interested. The salt levels were dropping around the swales. They said you must have washed it through. See, normally a huge amount of water will wash the salt through to the lower levels, which just makes the groundwater more salty. In the end, you'll salt it 20 metres deep if you keep doing that. And then it will take 1,000 years to recover. And we use only 1/5 the amount of water. So the water they thought we'd washed it all through. No, we used 1/5. That really got them when they realised how much water we hadn't used. With the same amount of water normally used on that much area, we could have done 50 acres. Originally, people laughed at us because we didn't put straight lines in. We went on contour with these swales. They thought, why don't you put, you've got a bulldozer, you can flatten the desert, you can stretch it, we want to go on contour because we've got a longer edge and we harvest the water passively. Then we planted more non-fruited trees than we did fruit trees, so they laughed at us. This is the real unproductive things, more productive things. What's the point, you know? In soil, it won't even grow anything, so, you know. And then we covered all the inside of the swale with a huge amount of mulch where they scrape all the organic matter off and burn it, like most traditional agriculture. in the middle of winter, we got a funny email saying, we've got a problem. We've got mushrooms growing in the soil. Well, they called it fungus, but when we saw a photograph of it, it was mushrooms, because they'd never seen mushrooms, because they've never had that much humidity in living history in the soil. And when you open up the mulch, there's all these little animals there, you know, there's little insects, and the soil has come alive. And the fungi net that's underneath the mulch is pulling off a waxy substance which is repelling the salt away from the area. And the decomposition is locking the salt up. And the salt is not gone, it's become inert and insoluble. So we could regreen the Middle East. We could regreen any desert. And we could desalt it at the same time. And if we can do it on an insignificant, flat, little bit of 10 acres of flat desert, if you give us something of a catchment or a wadi or canyon or any of those erosion gutters, we can turn it vital completely. You can fix all the world's problems in a garden. You can solve them all in a garden. You can solve all your pollution problems and all your supply line needs in a garden. Now most people actually today don't actually know that, and that makes most people very insecure.
So we got 5 more minutes for Q&A. So we only have about 5 minutes because the kids are going crazy, but we fully intend that we'll kind of stop there officially. Questions can keep going after that. We just got to probably get the kids, make sure the kids are not, kid leaders aren't overstressed with having the kids going too crazy. So.
Yes.
Okay, I have 2 questions.
Great.
The first one, I was asking both. The first one is, it's been illegal to collect rainwater.
Glad you asked. In Utah, you can collect up to 2,500 gallons of rainwater on your property, but over a certain amount, like I think 100 gallons or something, you have to register online. And I don't know where, but I'm sure if you look at the U.S. government, state government website, or just Google it, you can do it. So I don't think there's a fee. But
Yeah, you get 2 55-gallon drums without registering. And registering is free.
yeah.
Okay. And where do you get the things that are good for doing the collecting too?
More and more places are selling rain barrels and collection kits and things like that. But it's basically, your downspout from your the roof gutters. Yeah, you direct it into a big barrel. Now you want something that is obviously clean and has held chemicals and
Then you
stuff.
have to have a spigot.
So you use spigot. There are a lot of, there's a whole book on this called Rainwater Harvesting. In fact, there are a bunch of books on it now. And I'm not an expert on this. I have not done it myself. I've always wanted to and not been in a position to do it. But there are people that know how to do this. And I can help you figure that out if you're interested. But it's definitely doable, and it's now legal in Utah.
I've got a book on that. People can borrow if they'd like.
And you said something about sculpture the landscape so that it absorbs more. What was that?
Oh, that's just a reference to swales. And even on it's not something that could only be done on a farm, even in a yard. It may not be completely level. I mean, you probably have noticed where water collects when it rains. You could plan for that and make a water garden and have pebbles and moisture-loving plants, and even deepen it a little bit and collect a little more water, and then that water can seep into the landscape more gradually. And just not having hardscape, not having sand. If you've got permeable surfaces covered with mulch to help retain the moisture and to help slow the water. Because when water hits bare ground, it does a lot of damage. Wash the soil away. But when it hits mulch, a couple of inches of mulch, it's going to really slow it down and make it so that it can be a little more absorbent. Sure.
You were saying plant trees, so how does that, I guess I'm wondering how the trees help the lawn. Like if you plant a lot of shade trees on your lawn, does that help just shade it so that it doesn't evaporate as much? Is that
Trees and lawn, trees and grasses basically do not live well together. And So this is why I love the localscapes concept, where you can have your lawn, just put it in the middle in an area where, like I said, you have 8-foot diameter, and it's an area where you'll use it. You're not really using the lawn right up next to your house or right up next to your garden shed or something like that, or underneath a place. And then outside of the lawn, you have your trees, have your perennial landscape plants, and mulch that soil. And then, because the water and the trees kind of compete with each other, even though the tree roots go much deeper, but the watering that is set up to water lawns is not a beneficial setup for trees. Ideally, you want to water them very deeply, a lot, but infrequently, so that the water goes clear down to their roots and moistens the lower subsoil. Whereas, as we know, the lawn, it has very, very shallow roots. So ideally, you wouldn't have lawn underneath trees. Now, some varieties of grass have been developed that are more shade tolerant, but so better to separate them.
I have two thoughts. First is, a lot of philosophers have made statements like where they argue that we don't really have as much of an individual responsibility to do like environmental advocacy, but we do have a responsibility to pressure large corporations because they're the ones that really can make like a large impactful difference. And I tend to agree with that because as far as like the return on investment goes, this is all great and it's like obviously it helps, but like large corporations are the ones that can make substantial differences worldwide for longer periods of time. And my second thought was, as far as like individual efforts go, it's the best way to, it might not be as direct, it's definitely a more indirect impact, but the best way to conserve water is to change your diet. And like, I mean, we talked about this too, but like switching over to like a more plant-based diet, or at least cutting out some of your meat consumption, like not eating meat for 3 days a week is more, you save more water doing that than you can doing this for a month.
Well, that is such a huge topic that the second part, but actually would love to do a presentation on that when I've read all the books I've collected on it. But I would completely refute that point because most of the data that's out there that's been promoted by people with, an anti-meat agenda is bad science and bad numbers. And a lot of assumptions are just incorrect, and the relationship of raising animals to the grasslands and the soil is very ancient, and it's the way the Earth's biological systems work, the way the hydrologic cycle, the water cycle works, and the way soil building works, and trying to cut animals out it's well intended, but it's a big mistake, I believe. And I'm not telling anyone what they should eat or not eat, but to your first point, but again, that's such a big topic, I really want to, and I'd be happy to do a separate presentation on it. But the first one, yeah, corporations can make a big difference, but I think it's not either or.
Yeah.
And the more people start doing things at home and making changes at home, the more they're enlightened citizens that will speak up at work, I hope, and change things at work and help.
Well, and regardless of whether we can change things are going to change on us. Within about 7 years, we're going to be past the point where our water usage exceeds, on an average year, water usage exceeds the amount of water we have. So it's kind of just a reality. I think in about 10 years, once we fully realize that reality, we're not going to have lawns anymore. They're not going to allow you to have lawns, or they're going to say you can only water once a week or less. And so even though she's right, the fundamental point is right, that we can change more corporations, we're going to have to change ourselves as well. That's an inevitability.
By pushing corporations, they would make changes that affect the population.
We do have some things.
I think on all levels, public policy levels, governmental level, corporate level, neighborhood association levels, HOAs are a big offender, and individual levels. And I think we all need our consciousness raised. And I purposely left out most of the scary climate change information that I couldn't put in because I didn't want to depress everybody. And I really I'm not saying ignore that, but these are the kinds of things that you can actually do that do make a difference. And, many drops fill up a bucket, so if, more and more of us start being more conscious of our use for resources. Water seems abundant this year, and they don't know what to do with all the water that's coming down from the river. But it's not going to be that way every year, and as our population is growing faster, and as climate change is proceeding, we can't just assume it's always going to be there. That's why I think we can take measures that provide pleasure and abundance and joy now, and give us greater resilience for whatever comes.